Hello, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Appreciate you being here for this information session for the Pathways of Public Service and Civic Engagement. We're really excited about the turnout we have and the interest that's been generated about the potential of using this framework as well as the survey. And so we're here to tell you a little bit more about that, as well as provide an opportunity for you to ask some questions and get some answers about what it means to be to use the framework, to use the survey, and to be part of the working group. So to get us started, I'm gonna send it over to Juliette Brody, who's the faculty director of the Haas Center for Public Service at Stanford, and she's gonna get us started, and then we'll go from there. So, Juliette, it's all yours.
Thank you, Clayton. Good morning. Can you all hear me okay? Like many of us, I've been bopping about from meeting to meeting, and I find myself in a hallway here at Stanford. So I'm hoping my audio is okay and you can hear me. I'm so excited to welcome you on behalf of Stanford University and the Haas Center for Public Service. My job is just to say hello and to say some thank yous, and then I have one really important announcement. So first, Clayton, I wonder if you could go to the next slide. All I'm going to do is sort of give us a roadmap of this, this session, which is mostly going to be run by Gail Robinson, who I want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank Gail for the incredible work she has done to get this Pathways tool and survey and group moving. As many of you may know, Gail is going to be moving on to the next exciting chapter of her life. We're so grateful to her for sticking with us through December and helping to make sure that everyone on this call who's interested is able to attach to the working group. And Gail will tell you sort of the mechanism for doing that. But Gail, on behalf of Stanford and the national community of civic engagement and public service, university-based public service, I just want to say thank you for everything you have done to get us to this moment. So let's just take a moment to thank Gail. And I'm going to turn it over to her in a moment. I also want to acknowledge Tom Schnaubelt, who many of you probably knew as the executive director of the Haas Center and my close colleague and collaborator. He did so much to advance the pathways of public service, including the making of them available through this great community nationwide. I wanted to make sure everyone had seen the news that Tom has transitioned to a new role at Stanford, where he's going to be really leaning into civic engagement and democratic principles in our Center for Deliberative Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law. So you can watch for, if you haven't seen it, the announcement of Tom's new role is very exciting. Obviously, Haas Center friendly and adjacent, so we'll continue to work together. My third thing to do is to make the exciting announcement that this means we are looking for our new executive director. And I will put in the chat momentarily a link to the job description and the posting, since I know that people on this call include great leaders in community and university-based community engaged learning and public service. So I'm really hoping you will take a look at this job posting and share it in your network. So watch for that in the chat in a moment. But then just my job to do the quick overview. We've done the introductions. I would love for everyone, if you're comfortable, to introduce yourself briefly in the chat. If you wouldn't mind sharing your name, the institution that you're dialing in from, and anything else about your institution. For example, if there's a specific university center that you're representing here, we'd love to just know a little bit about who's on the call in the chat. I know there's a lot of us, so that'll be a lot for us to read, but hopefully it gives us a sense of this community. And then I'm gonna, Gail is going to, the bulk of the call will be Gail taking us through the Pathways framework and the survey, letting you all know what this is all about, including some examples to show how other institutions have used this in their work and sharing those out. And then Clayton will take us through a discussion and next steps for how to attach if you wish to do so. So again, on behalf of Stanford and the Haas Center, thank you, Gail and Tom in absentia, and I'll turn it over to Gail now. I think I'll wait until maybe closer to the end of the call because I don't want to distract you with the job posting. I'll let folks continue to introduce themselves. And then at the end, Clayton, remind me when we're doing next steps to post that job posting in the chat. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here, and turn it over to Gail.
Thanks, Juliet, and good afternoon or good morning, everybody. As Juliet said, I've been working with Stanford and the Pathways Working Group. Actually, for the last 3 years, I was introduced to the Pathways in 2014 at the Continuums of Service Conference in Honolulu. And I just noticed that the call for proposals for the Continuums of Service Conference is back in Honolulu next spring. So for those of you interested in getting a paid trip to go to Hawaii, I encourage you to go. At any rate, my background is primarily working with community colleges. I directed a national federal service learning grants with the American Association of Community Colleges from 1994 to 2012. And then I've been consulting since 2012, and particularly working with Stanford since 2014, when I was introduced to the Pathways. And in 2019, started managing the working group and kind of putting together some of the things that you'll be seeing today. So let's just jump right in. Oh, and the transition that I'm doing is retiring. And so I'm in the middle of that business. So this is maybe my last Zoom ever, which is really kind of exciting. No. Clayton, if you would mind advancing our slides, please, and we'll get going into the review. So I'm going to talk about sort of the evolution and rationale of the Pathways Framework and Survey. For those of you who this may be brand new, others you may have heard about it at conferences and webinars and different venues. So in 2012, Tom Schnabelt, as Juliet said, was noticing with students from the Haas Center that most of them had misunderstandings and misconceptions about public service and civic engagement. So they didn't see a range of options or a spectrum of service. It was more just like there's charity or there's social justice and nothing in between. And on top of this, there wasn't really a shared framework to use across the field with other higher ed partners in civic engagement. So Stanford staff at the Haas Center created this holistic framework, the Pathways of Public Service and Civic Engagement, to share across different institutions and cultural contexts to give different meaningful comparative analyses so that you and your students, faculty, can help or can understand the impact of various programs and interventions on students, on communities, on institutions in a generalizable way. So the pathways collectively describe a range of possibilities by which students can explore social change and contribute. Actually, Clayton, not quite yet. Go back. So there are a range of possibilities that students can contribute while they're in college and thinking about how they can participate and advance the common good throughout their careers. So that's the setup for the framework itself. The survey was created by the Haas Center at Stanford and piloted at St. Mary's College of California and UC Berkeley in 2013, and then has been modified over the years by the Pathways Working Group. And I'll be talking more about the working group specifically later on, but it's stakeholders since 2014, so 7-8 years now, at 88 different colleges, universities, and higher ed organizations. And you'll see the list later on, as I said. So the survey does have broad applicability across higher ed, different levels. All types of institutions use the survey, 2-year and 4-year, public, private. And the survey is relevant as a tool because it can help students determine their own personal and career pathways, knowing their own commitments and interests may change over time. And it also helps faculty and staff help their students through advising and teaching. Now let's go to the next slide, Clayton. So here we have this really nice graphic of the 6 pathways of public service and civic engagement. I'm not going to read all those little definitions. You can do that for yourself. But we've got community engaged learning, direct service, policy and governance, community organizing and activism, philanthropy, and social entrepreneurship and corporate social responsibility. We acknowledge that terms and language might differ a little bit from campus to campus, and this is not a perfect typology, but over the 7 or 8 years that the working group has existed, we have tweaked some of the language, some of the definitions, some of the names, and these are the 6 pathways that everybody has pretty much agreed to use. And we also want to recognize there's no single pathway to public change. All of these overlap. Students may be doing different kinds of service in the course of their college careers that dips into one or the other, or 2 or more pathways at the same time. But using the framework, what we found is that it helps students understand how to make a difference and hopefully prepare to become lifelong change agents. That's our long-term goal. Next slide. So this is the front page of the online survey, and I hope everybody read the email that Molly sent out last week asking you to go through the survey itself so you can get a sense of what it looks like and what you end up with. I'm only going to show a few different screenshots of the survey, especially for those of you who haven't had a chance to look at it. I encourage you to go to the bit.ly URL in the upper right-hand corner. That goes to the Pathways Working Group website. There is a demonstration version of the survey there that you can take. There's also a short video that you can watch that might be helpful in explaining what the survey and the framework are about. So the idea again behind the survey is that it attempts to measure students' proclivities toward public service and civic engagement. And the screen gives students the idea of what the purpose of the survey is, explains what the 6 pathways are. And one thing that's really important for you all to know is if you participate in the working group, and even if you don't want to and just use the public non-collecting version that's online, for those who do choose to join the working group, Stanford's IRB has approved the survey, but we can't collect information on anybody under 18 for one thing, and we don't collect any individual identifiable information for students. So it's safe to use in that way. That's not really the right word to say, but I'll get into this a little bit later, but when we look at the survey and the results for those who are in the working group, you can find some ways to dig down a little deeper into the data, and we look at some aggregated data as well. Okay, next slide. This is where we provide 6 topic-specific examples for respondents to select from. Originally, we had a general survey that was all just a kind of a mix of different questions and examples. I think about 5 years ago, we added diversity, equity, and inclusion, education and youth development, environmental sustainability, health, and human services, so that students, if they have a particular interest in any of those areas, can take the survey and get questions and examples that are specific to those particular topics. And it may be that we add a couple more topic areas over the coming years, but for right now, we have these 6. So as you go through the survey, you'll get specific examples related to the topic area that you chose. And then at the bottom of that screen, you see the icons and the definitions all color-coded for the 6 pathways. Next slide. So this is one example of one of the pathways. Each one has its own screen or page in the survey that contains the definition at the top, the icon, examples of what that pathway can look like for students. And notice there's also a career option so that students can have some idea. We've noticed with some student responses to the survey that they might complain that, well, the career option didn't apply to me, so this doesn't, I don't see why I would choose this one. If we had all the career options and all the different possible examples, this would be a really long survey. So again, we just try to keep this shorter so it's easy to get through, quick to get through, but give students at least a range of the different examples for what can be considered, in this case, community organizing and activism. And then for each of the 6 pathways, students answer the same identical 4 questions: how much experience they have in the pathway, how much interest they have in exploring the pathway during college, how much impact they think they personally could have on each pathway, and then in general, how much impact the pathway has on social issues. So basically, they'll see this screen 6 different times, one for each of the 6 pathways. Next slide, please. This is what we call the results page, and it's what pops up at the end of the survey. So again, if you've gone through the survey, you would have this that you may have saved or printed out for yourself. So what you'll see is the top pathways by description. In this case, the student picked policy and governance and community engaged learning and research. And those are because of the answers that they put in the previous slide in that page. And if you look at the bars, and of course, everything's nicely color coded, so it's a little bit easier to look at. The bars show the amount of experience or interest that students have. And then right below that, it shows what they think their personal impact can be, and then the larger impact on society. Sorry, I just got mixed up here for a second. What we'll see sometimes, we've heard from some of the working group members, is that some students will say this just confirms what they already know about themselves. And for others, particularly younger students, 18, 19-year-olds, this may open their eyes to some possibilities for what they might want to explore in college and also in terms of careers down the road. Next slide. This is, again, still part of the results page, but it's a little bit further down as you scroll down, and it shows top pathways by activities. This refers to a drag and drop activity that happens early on in the survey, and it's simply a way to help, excuse me, to help students compare their top pathways, either by activities or by the conceptions, by those examples that we had. And again, in this case, the student picked community engaged learning and research as their top 2 activities. So the bottom half of this page then shows all the rest of the icons. And what we hope that by having these 2 different versions, and again, this is something that Pathways Working Group members suggested that we create. It gives you as the instructor, as the advisor, as the supervisor of the student, different ways to help them reflect on what they have selected in terms of pathways they may be interested in, so that you might be able to suggest particular placements or activities or clubs or whatever that students might be interested in getting involved in. Next slide. This actually goes back to the top of the results page. So I just want to point out at the very top, students can print or save their results as a PDF. There's a reflection worksheet that they can open that hopefully is something that you would find useful. And then the green box button, visit local resources, that is a button that is tailored specifically to your institution, your community. So you tell us after students get done taking the survey, where do you want the survey to direct them? So it might be your community engagement center or the advising office or leadership program, whatever it is that you want to focus on. That's where that local button will take you. The next slide. Oh, okay. I just wanted to give you one example really quickly of how the data look in aggregate. So each year at the end of the academic year, the survey closes on June 30th. And Annabelle Wong, who is our data and research consultant, does an analysis of the previous year's data for all of the students that have participated that particular year. So you'll see this is from 2020, 2021. We had over 3,500 students that took the survey. And excuse me. So the idea behind this is we can look at what the aggregated data say, and then you could look at your own college or university's results and see if your students compare similarly to the national. And we've seen pretty much over the years that most students, unless they're in a particular program with a particular focus in one of the pathways, most of the individual working group members end up with data that looks similar to the national aggregate. So just for example, to kind of walk you through this, if you look at that top bar, that's the direct service. pathway, and the blue bars indicate that students said that they had either some or a lot of experience in direct service. And then only 14% said they had no experience in direct service. This is common. We've seen this again over the years as we've been collecting this data since 2015. Direct service is the most popular, hands down. But then you look at the bottom two, policy and governance and social entrepreneurship and corporate social responsibility. 51 and 53% of students said they had no experience in either of those. So you can just see that comparison to direct service. That's not something that students either are exposed to or necessarily interested in. And very few of them, 5% or 3%, say that they've had a lot of experience in that pathway. So we do these kind of graphs for experience, interest, impact, personally and generally at a social level, so that we can see from year to year how the aggregated data changes and any different kinds of trends in what students are thinking and how they experience the pathways. If you want to see more data like this, I will recommend that you go to Campus Compact's website. We did a webinar in October of 2020 on the pathways, and it's got a lot more data. So feel free to head there after this info session if you're interested in more information. Okay, next slide. This is a list of all the institutions and organizations that have been part of the working group since 2014. It represents over 88 participating institutions and organizations. We have a few consortia, as you can see, and more than 14,000 students that have taken the survey in that time. Currently, we have 43 active working group members. We hope that some of you will join today or in the near future. And it may be that, I know that there are a few of you who are from institutions that had previously been part of the working group, and we would certainly welcome you back if you want to try using the pathways again, using the survey. One thing that is really exciting for this year, I had mentioned 14,000 students have taken the survey over 8 years. For just this year alone, we already have 5,600 students that are planning to take the survey, and perhaps more than that. So we'll be increasing our data collection significantly, and we're really, really happy about seeing that kind of participation. Also want to note at the bottom right corner in the last column, we have participants from University of Western Australia, which is not an active participant now, but from Qatar University. So we have the survey available in English and in Arabic for students there. And Campus Compact is going to be looking at perhaps making it available with some other international institutions and organizations. And Clayton may be talking about that a little bit later on. That's down the road. Okay, next slide. So if you're interested in joining the working group, which is what this is all about, it's a wonderful professional learning community. The people who are in the group are just great. It's been terrific to be able to work with folks from around the country. It's a nice, well, obviously it's been mostly online collaboration over the last couple of years due to the pandemic, but we do have quarterly Zoom meetings and in-person retreats every year or two. So that's an opportunity to learn more and get more deeply involved in the working group. We do the data and collection and analysis that you just saw the slide before. We do use the Qualtrics platform. Most colleges and universities tend to have Qualtrics accounts, so that should be pretty easy for you to access. And if not, there are ways that we can get you an account, so you don't have to worry about that. We do have the data that's collected individually. As soon as you would join the working group and start using the survey, you can see your students' data immediately. And again, we collect that and aggregate the data at the end of every academic year. One of the best parts, I think, about the working group is all the shared resources. We have a Google Drive that the working group members can post information on their own examples, syllabi, different workshops they've done, different kinds of case studies. We've got a facilitator's guide if you want to figure out how to walk students through what the pathways are, and how to get them to use the survey. And one really great thing, again, that came out of the working group was a faculty staff survey. So you could use the faculty staff version if you are looking to get some faculty or staff involved, and want to expand use of the survey across campus. So it's just a different way for them to look at the survey. It's a little bit different than the version that's the public version that you would have gone through. Hopefully that's on the Pathways website. We ask everybody who is part of the working group to keep these resources within the working group. That's one of the benefits of being part of it, because it helps for professional development for folks at your own institution, and it's part of keeping the survey and the data in the best shape possible. We know that there are some institutions that have looked at the survey and created their own versions, which is fine. This is an open educational resource, basically, but the value of being part of the working group is the networking and the data collection and analysis. So that's the big piece that we really like to propose for you. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways that our current and previous working group members have used the survey and the framework. Several institutions use it in community-based learning and service learning courses. So currently 28 of our working group members are doing Pathways work in service learning and community-based learning courses. Leadership programs, honors, first-year experience, residence halls and living learning communities, AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps Reads, orientation, freshman, first-year experience. There's a lot of different ways to use it. And what we, again, hope that working group members will do is come up with new ways, share those new ways to use it in different settings, so that other working group members can benefit from that. And actually, we maintain an inventory that collects from each of the working group members how they're using the survey. So that's where those numbers come from. And that's something that we collect every year as working group members renew their membership with the Pathways. Currently 16 of our working group members use this with student advising, and that was where the Pathways came from initially. So advising was always a big piece, and it's kind of expanded beyond that. Using it in program planning and development, that's pretty general, especially for co-curricular programming, that you might find different ways that you can explore using the Pathways to benefit your own programs. One thing I want to say about student advising, just one example, at the University of Pittsburgh, they have coded all of their engagement and community-based activities by each pathway, so that students can go online and say, I only want to do things in philanthropy. So they can plug that in and see all the different community partners that do philanthropy-based work. Or maybe they only want to work with partners in a particular neighborhood. They can pull those up and then see which different pathways are being offered at those partners. So that's a good example of using student advising tools that also helps the program planning and development piece. Another thing that can happen with the survey, if you start out and you could use it with as few as 5 students, you can use it with 5,000 students. There's no limit, there's no low end, there's no high end. That's one nice thing about Qualtrics, is it allows you to use the survey with as many students as you need. You might find, based on how students respond and where their interests lie and what they're interested in pursuing during college, that let's say you're working with a leadership program, and most of those students say that they're really interested in social entrepreneurship, but that's not something that your institution has done a lot with, or your office has done a lot with. So that gives you a chance to sort of level up and think about what maybe should you be offering as an institution, as a program, for students that hits, in the pathways that students are more interested in. So that's one other helpful way to look at survey results. And one other thing for community colleges specifically that use guided pathways or career pathways, these pathways, same word, different meaning, do overlap really nicely with those. So it's just kind of another tool to put in your toolbox is the way that I like to think about it. And then finally, the research portion, we've mostly done as a full working group, but each individual institution can, do some deep dives into their own data, compare them to the aggregated data. We have some universities this year that are going to use the survey on a pre-post basis, so they can look at students' changes over the course of a semester, the course of the academic year, because we also collect demographic data at the end of the survey. We can also look at who's using it, how students are responding for different demographic reasons. And right now we have 2 working group members that have started a project with some research fellows working on career profiles. So that'll be coming out within the next year or 2, hopefully, as a publication. And if you join the working group, you'll learn more about that from the people who are working on that project. Next slide. So I just wanted to give you a few other specific examples. At George Mason University in Virginia, they started using the pathways with their annual leadership conference for students. They would have the participants take the survey, and then in small groups, they would discuss their results and do an interactive component to talk about different ways that the pathways intersect and can lead to positive social change. So it's a nice collaborative activity for students on that campus. Next slide. At Drake University in Iowa, this is a version of the reflection worksheet that's part of the survey results page. So they've created on their website a series of pages where students can see the different possibilities for where and how they can get engaged locally, and then click on those links for community partners that can address particular issues. So each of the 6 pathways is represented on their website. And so here you see education and youth development. And then within the 6 pathways: community engaged learning and research, community organizing, etc. For different topic areas, they have different examples. So education and youth development is what you see here. They also have homelessness, mental health, LGBTQ rights, equity and inclusion, environmental sustainability, and food waste and recovery. And so those are all opportunities that students can do in the Des Moines area where the college or where the university is. Next slide. Cal State University San Bernardino has done something sort of similar to what the University of Pittsburgh did, but instead of an online database, they created this online brochure and organized all of its community engagement activities by pathway. So these are just 2 of the pages showing 2 of the different pathways. And then again, with active links that go directly to on-campus and off-campus placement sites for students. So it's a really nice way to organize all of their information, and then they can update this every year. And it's an easy thing for students to access. Okay, I think that's the end of my examples. Clayton, you want to hit the next slide? Yep. So I'm going to pass it off to Clayton, but I'll still be here available to answer questions as we go, because I know I went through all of that kind of quickly.
Thank you, Gail. And yeah, that is a lot of information, but it's also super interesting. That's the first time I've seen you lay it all out like that with the examples, especially, and seeing how different folks are using that data for a lot of different purposes, not just advising, but ways of demonstrating new opportunities that students can take based on what they're learning, and as well as using it in a way that allows them to continue to develop and enhance their programs. So thanks for that. So just to get us into the next step here, I think it'd just be interesting to see how, now that you've seen this presentation, and you may have thought of this before, but how do you imagine maybe using the pathways at your institution? If you're interested and you kind of have an idea, it'd be great if you could slide that in chat so other folks that are here can also sort of get introduced to the ways that you're thinking about it. Because as Gail said, there's no one way to do it, and people are always inventing new ways to use the framework and the survey. So that would be great to see how some people are doing that. So in terms of next steps for folks who may be interested in joining the working group, and if you have more questions about that, you can certainly ask. But Gail had talked a little bit about that, but really being involved with a group of folks who are thinking about the survey or using the survey, are giving sort of feedback on how it's going and sharing information with each other and experiences one another is great. It's been a great experience for those who've gone through it. And giving them, just a chance to connect. And again, Gail can talk more about that if you have questions. But just in terms of if you're interested in joining that, there's a number of steps that you want to take or be expected to take to get in there. And one is just signing a working group agreement, which we can certainly send to you at your request. That goes through some of the specifics of the working group activity and so forth. Also a description of how you plan to use the survey and your target number of students. And as Gail said before, getting from you an exit link. So if somebody takes the survey, where would you like them to end up after they've sort of clicked submit, to one of the pages that would be of use to you or that you'd want it introduced to the students when they're done. Giving us some contact info for a couple of representatives at your institution, and then obviously just giving us a little bit of background in terms of the Carnegie classification. So it allows us to kind of know sort of where to compare and look at some of the different experiences, as we work through the data. Whoops. So again, I think Gail had said that, but if you're interested in more about the working group and to try the survey, if you didn't get a chance to already, there's that address there that you can check out. And just to introduce myself, my name is Clayton Hurd. I'm the Director of Professional Development Engaged Scholarship at Campus Compact. And I'll be one of the contacts with Juliet at Stanford throughout this next several months to be able to answer your questions. Gail is on; she'll be really helping with getting people onboarding to join the working group. But most of the questions you may have about doing that and the forms and so forth should come to me. And you see my email there, so do not hesitate to reach out to me. So at this point, I would like to open it up to some questions. I'm going to try to get back into chat here. There's one already, but certainly you can either ask them in chat, or we'll give an opportunity for folks if they want to join us in speech and ask a question. But the first one came from Zeno. He's at the Medical College of Wisconsin. And he was interested to know if these are all mostly undergraduate students, or if this has been done, and this goes to Gail really, with grad programs, because he's particularly interested in incoming medical students. So wondering if that's a possibility.
I know that Cardinal Stritch University in Wisconsin had been using the survey with grad students, not medical students, though. I think it was a leadership program, and the person there has left and gone to a different institution. It's certainly applicable for any student. And just as an FYI, we also have a new K-12 version, really for high school students, but that's on the website, the working group website too. So we would absolutely welcome medical students. I mean, that'd be an interesting, different version of results, I'm sure. Well, maybe not. Maybe they would be the exact same as all the other undergrads, and we do collect, because of the demographic data, we break it down by year in college so that we'd be able to tell how many others are coming. But to my knowledge, other than Cardinal Stritch, I don't know that any other grad students, but it may be before I got involved in managing the working group in 2019, there may have been some others.
Great, thanks, Gail. Another question from Muriel. Hi, Muriel. I've seen you for a little while. Good to see your name on there. What are the responsibilities of working group members? Can you talk a little bit more about what that entails to be a working group member?
Sure. Basically agreeing to participate in the quarterly Zoom meetings. We know not everybody's going to make every Zoom, but it's participating at some level in the Zooms. We do have a Google group where people can ask questions of each other, and primarily using the survey. So that's really it. It's pretty easy. And as I said, you could use it with a group as small as 5 students or your entire freshman class. We have examples of both of those exactly this year. So there's no limit on that. And one thing that that I hadn't mentioned, over the past, prior to the pandemic, the participation in the working group was available at no cost. Because of budget losses and changes and things during during COVID, Stanford started requesting a voluntary $200 membership fee for each year. Some institutions can afford to pay more and they put in more, which is great. And that basically has gone to cover some of my time and Annabelle Wong's time. Again, she's our data and research analyst. But that is not mandated, not required. We're going to be shifting the pathways from Stanford to Campus Compact. You also, if you're a Campus Compact member, great, because this is going to be a membership benefit that you get, but it's also available to non-Campus Compact members. So just FYI, try this out without having to worry about your budget.
Yeah, thanks. And that last thing that you said there, Gail, you answered Suzanne's question, who wanted to know, and I would have answered that question as well. Does the institution need to be a member of Campus Compact in order to join? No, and I think it will. I think as we move forward, it will definitely be incentivized. It will be a more of an incentive to be involved if you're a Campus Compact member, but we're open to members and non-members absolutely in the working group. Are there other questions folks have that either they want to jump in here or leave it in the chat? I'm going to leave a little space here for folks to answer anything that's on there or ask anything that's on their mind.
Clayton, someone asked if you're going to make the slides available.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can. If I think we probably could just do a follow-up email to everyone who's registered and see that you get the slides. So I'll have Molly, our communications director, do that through the system. We also will have a recording. So I think if you would like others to sort of watch this and don't want to explain that all to them, I think we'll make this recording available as well. So that's another option.
And I see Mira with another question about participation of an international institution. I think that's a big yes, right?
Yep, absolutely. We did have, I know before I got involved, 2 universities in China used the pathways and I believe had translated them into Mandarin. I don't know, and we don't have contact information for those people anymore, so I'm not sure where that is. But as I mentioned before, Qatar University is using the survey both in English and Arabic. And anybody, like if you're looking for something to have, because the survey exists easily for us in English, if any other institution internationally would want to help with the translation into another language, that's absolutely something that we're open to doing.
Elizabeth, your question, that's a good one. And we don't have a Spanish translation yet, right, Gail? Is that correct? But we were talking just the other day, and I was thinking that would be a great thing to do, but absolutely. And we'd love partnership on that. That's something we'd be 100% behind. I think it would be really useful going forward, not just for a number of institutions, both domestically and internationally.
I see Laura's question about, is the reflection worksheet only available to working group members? No. If you go back to the working group website and go through the non-collecting public version of the survey there, you can go through that. At the end, your results page will pop up, and that's where you can see the link to the reflection worksheet. It's just it's a one-pager, but it's something that's really easy and absolutely something that you could adapt for your own purposes. And we'd encourage that.
There's a question there, Gail, and it probably goes to you because you've been involved from the beginning. What would you say the biggest challenges of using the pathways that you've heard about through the process?
I can't think of a single one, honestly. I guess in some respects is when one person may have learned about the pathways at a conference or something, and they started using them, and then they left and nobody else at their institution knew that they had been using the pathways. And so the data just goes away. We still have the data available. And so that's a sort of a challenge from our end of, we've had these 88 institutions and organizations over the years, but some come and go. And, during the pandemic, sometimes a lot of people thought, I can't take on one more thing, so I'm not going to use the pathways for a while. But we've had institutions come back and rejoin the working group. So I can't really think of particular challenges. I mean, give it a try. You don't lose anything by giving it a shot.
It's a question from Sarah around whether institutions have trained or utilized peer leaders to work with students to sort of review the results of the, and I'm guessing that related to advising in terms of reviewing results and helping them make some choices.
Yeah, I think there probably have been a couple. I would need to go back and look in the inventory to see that, but that would be a great question. And I think because we do have several, let's see how many that we had in leadership. I think 20 some different institutions that had it in leadership programs. So that would be ideal for peer leaders. So I can't answer that specifically, but I could get back to you, Sarah.
Yeah, I definitely know instances of having, encouraging students to do the survey and then bring the, the anonymized results to work with an advisor on them. And so that's often how it would happen. A student would fill out the survey or be encouraged to, or maybe even right there in the office could fill out the survey. You could print out the findings and then work with that student right at that time, which I think certainly students could be trained to do that as well as your professional staff.
Yeah, and so you can do that one-on-one, but back to the George Mason University example, they did that with 1 to 200 students at their leadership conference each year, where students in small groups work together to figure out how they might want to do things along the pathways. So there's a variety of ways, and there's no one way to do it. There's no wrong way to do it.
Julie has a question here, and that says, after years in this type of work, I find myself wondering about the effectiveness of our programs. We are such a small office, though. Has anyone partnered with another office or department to assist?
Definitely. Because we restrict the working group to 2 representatives per institution. Sometimes it's just 1 person because it's a small program, but you might want, say, somebody from institutional research who can help you figure out the data depending on how many students you would want to take the survey, or somebody from the advising office. So sure, again, I think making as many connections as possible within your campus can only help.
There's a question from Laura that the local opportunities that students are encouraged to explore after they complete the survey, is that something that institutions would provide, create, and customize to the local community? I mean, yes, I think that would be the role of the local institution to do that.
Right. And the link that goes from the results page that goes to your site, that could be a site that you already have existing. So it's not necessarily something new that you create. The examples that I shared from Drake and from Cal State San Bernardino, those were new things that they created based on their work with the survey, but after they'd been part of the working group for 3 or 4 years each. So generally, it'll just go to your program's website. Maybe if it's a community partner that you're working with specifically on pathways things, it could go there. It's completely up to you.
Any other questions? And again, feel free to jump in on your mic too, if that's an easier way to communicate a question.
Another thing I'll mention is that membership and starting in the working group is on a rolling basis. There's no particular time. We start the renewal process over the summer just to make sure that we can get colleges and universities up and running with the survey, because we tinker with it over the summer months. So it's usually available beginning first half of August, and then it runs through June. It's available through June 30. So that's when your links, and you get a specific link unique to your institution for your Qualtrics data. So if you have a program coming up next week, we can create a link for you. And if you send, Clayton, go back one slide. If you send in the 5 things that we need from you, we can get you up and running really, really quickly so that you've got a survey ready to use. And, I know the way that some institutions work, you may have to go through some hoops and get some higher ups approval, and that's completely fine. So that may take you a little longer to go through that. If you need Stanford's IRB documentation, we are happy to provide that. Just let us know. Really, I mean, we're here to help you. I'm here for a little while, then Clayton's here to help you get on board. And again, I would just say before we run out of time, the working group is a wonderful, terrific group of people from all across the country and around the planet that are all doing really terrific work, and really welcome new folks coming in because everybody has new things to share.
Great. Well, I want to thank you. We're getting right near the end of the time. I don't see any other questions unless someone wants to throw one in the chat last minute, but I want to thank you all for being here today and learning more about the pathways and the survey. We hope that you are interested and engaged by this and want to try it out. If so, please feel free to reach out to me. If I can take you back to the last slide, but there's my email. Feel free to do that. And I also want to thank again, Gail, for all her work on this over the years as she moves on. It's so wonderful to have had you involved and been such a big part of this. And thank you, Juliet, as well, as our Stanford partner, for being here as part of this. And again, as any questions come up in the future, let us know, but we will send around the slides as well as a link to the recording so you can use that for your purposes.
Thank you, Clayton and Gail. And I did, as promised, put the link to the job description and posting for the open director of executive director at the Haas Center in the chat. So please have a look at that and share it out to your networks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a great day.